gratefully with you.
All right, Phil, this is so funny to me that liberal commentators in particular, the progressive talking heads, they don't seem to cover this story or to care about this story at all, even though at the same time they're constantly, fabricating all these stories about corruption and collusion and bribery and pay to play and conflict of interest, about President Trump and everyone associated with him, and they don't care about this at all.
Well, it's pretty amazing. Bob Menendez has managed to delay this trial for about 2.5 years since the indictment first came down, making really spurious legal claims. He actually had been claiming that his corrupt actions were protected under the Constitution's speech or debate clause. He was saying when he tried to get the Medicare fraud investigation dropped and got the visas for the supermodel girlfriends, all of that was such official action that he was acting as a senator and had constitutional protection. He got laughed out of court in the district court, in the Court of Appeals. He tried to appeal to the Supreme Court and lost there. And now he's finally facing trial next week. And you heard what his defense is going to be at trial, which is I took no official actions. The guy was just my friend. So he's actually now going to say the exact opposite of what he's been saying for the past 2 years. And I'll tell you, Liz, this story has everything. 3 major international supermodels. They were partying on private jets, lavish international resorts. They were paying for all of it with my money, your money, all of your viewers' money. $105 million stolen from Medicare in a fraud scheme for which Melgen has already been convicted. Menendez tried to get that investigation dropped. He was actually sitting in Harry Reid's office in the United States Capitol asking then HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius to drop the investigation into that Medicare fraud scheme that ripped us off for over $100 million. This case has everything, and unbelievably, this guy has been in the U.S. Senate for the past 2.5 years under indictment for all of these allegations. And when the media could have been having a field day with all of those specifics, with pictures of the girls and the planes and the resorts and everything else, they've been about as close to silent as you can imagine. Although, Liz, with the actual trial coming next week, I think they're going to be forced to cover it.
I certainly hope so. I mean, regardless of whether he's convicted, whether he turns out to be a crook or not, he's just a bad U.S. senator. I mean, he truly believes that different standards apply to him than apply to his constituents. It's shocking.
Even if he is somehow acquitted because the legal standard of official act somehow gets him off the hook the way it did for Bob McDonnell from Virginia, who I also thought was quite guilty, by the way, there's no question that he took massive amounts of cash contributions, lived this lavish lifestyle at resorts and on jet planes and all the rest of it. And in exchange, he tried to get a Medicare fraud investigation dropped for this guy who had stolen $100 million from Medicare. Now, if somehow that's not a crime because we've whittled the bribery statute down to the point where we can't even prosecute that, that would still be no excuse for the Ethics Committee keeping this guy in the U.S. Senate. And I frankly think it's disgusting that for the past 2.5 years, the Senate Ethics Committee has just been sitting on its hands and saying, well, let's wait for the criminal trial. Because frankly, they could have kicked him out just on the basis of what we already know and should have.
Right, they certainly should have. They were too busy, as you know, pointing fingers, unsubstantiated fingers at President Trump. Phil, let me ask you this before we run out of time. So theoretically, if he's convicted, he could face expulsion from the Senate. It's not an automatic process. They have to actually vote on that, the other senators do, to see if he could retain his seat or not. If he doesn't retain his seat, if he's expelled for the Senate, I mean, this could theoretically change the entire course of Obamacare if what President Trump said or said last week in his rally at Phoenix is true and that it really only came down to one vote.
Yeah, it's hard to say because we don't know for sure if one of the other moderate liberal Republicans would have voted no if McCain had voted yes. Sometimes they play games with trading off votes, but no question it could be huge. If he's forced to resign or is expelled from the Senate while Chris Christie is still governor, then this will become a Republican seat. But that's precisely why I expect Democrats to circle the wagons and say it's perfectly fine to have a convicted felon in the Senate while they stall and drag their feet, eyeing January 16th on the calendar, which is when the new governor will be inaugurated in New Jersey. And all the polls right now say it'll probably be a Democrat. So you're going to see some really outrageous, I think, politics from Democrats putting political advantage over the most basic ethics and potentially saying a convicted felon should remain in the Senate for a couple of months until they can have a Democrat to replace him instead of a Republican.
Oh, 100%. The justification, it's going to be absolutely wild here. I mean, we need to hold their feet to the fire. We need to get as many Democrats on record as possible in the interim. If Menendez is convicted, absolutely saying that, that he should still be allowed in the Senate, because once they say that,
they won't answer the question, though.
They definitely won't. But we still owe it. We still owe it to the constituents and to the people of the United States to ask them this, because this is such a cover-up. It's absolutely ridiculous. Phil?